defensive lineman makes a move and the tackle and guard look at each other like, I thought you had him. Where were you? Those were the looks we had after a lot of times Drake Porter was pulling the ball out of his own net this year.
Yeah, that it boggles my mind how that looked in general. But you're right. I mean, that may have had an impact on it. Just the fact that they didn't have the hours together, the time together, the just in general the amount of play that you would expect them to have could have had a serious impact, similar to the offensive line and the issues that happened this year, and to be fair, have happened a couple years on that front.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it seem like we're excusing the performance at all, because I think there is going out is one thing, going out the way that they did, not really being competitive in a number of games this year, and especially last night, was incredibly disappointing for this team and this program. But we should stop with the bad news at least for a little bit and talk about the good news on the lacrosse standpoint, and that's the women's team.
Absolutely. And for the record, I believe if people are tuning in right now, we've probably had about 10 minutes of non-broadcast lacrosse information, because I still am trying to figure out YouTube 100%. But welcome to the cast. I don't know if YouTube will pick up what we had done prior, but we did recap the mess of a men's lacrosse loss, 18-8 to Georgetown. You're probably better off for missing that.
Yes.
I apologize to Kevin for us actually having a very good conversation that did not get captured. However, here we are talking about the at this point significantly better of the two lacrosse teams on campus. That would be the women, who happened to face a team. Did they play Loyola earlier in the year, I believe?
I thought so.
Yeah, and I think they beat them handily, and they definitely did again. 20-8 against Loyola in the NCAA quarterfinals. I believe. There's only 4 rounds in the women's tournament, or in
They
the
head to
lacrosse
the
tournaments.
quarterfinals next, I believe. So
Okay,
this was
so
second
round of
round.
16. Yep,
So quarterfinals is Florida next weekend.
gotcha.
That's the matchup.
So yeah, they're still
Yeah,
rolling on the road to road to the Final Four. So
yeah, and the women, like for overcoming obstacles this year, two devastating injuries to the top two offensive players, and I hope it's pronounced Megan Terrell. 7 goals today. That's a new program record for NCAA tournament scoring, which is impressive when you think about the attack position and Syracuse women's lacrosse history and the players that have come through here. Kayla Trainer and Katie Rowan and
yeah,
Alyssa Murray, to name a few, and Michelle Tumalo, and to set a program record over those players is a pretty big accomplishment. So congratulations to Megan on that. And I think the expectation for Syracuse is that the top 4 teams, probably in the women's side, seem to be pretty clearly ahead of the rest of the country. Um, Obviously, you can't take anybody lightly in a one and done scenario, but the hope is that this team can get this win against Florida and make it to the Final Four. And I haven't looked at the bracket, and I think hopefully that you avoid North Carolina as long as possible, and hope to get them in the final, and then take your chances in that scenario.
yeah, and thankfully with they got the 1 seed, we got the 3 seed, so it will be a finals matchup. The Final Four would be since it'd be the 2-3 with us against Northwestern.
Northwestern, yeah.
Yeah, not Boston, Chicago. Got it. Um,
Yeah.
so battle of the journalism schools for the Final Four to face the juggernaut that is currently UNC. I know in the Selection Sunday show, John and Christian and I had talked about how SU, every time they've played UNC, has gotten better.
Yep.
So third time, the old adage, third time in a season. If
Yep.
SU can make it that far, then you never know. And
Yeah, I
like you
mean, at
said, it's
that
a
point,
one-off.
all of the pressure and expectations are on UNC.
Right.
I think, when we talk about title or bust teams, they've certainly demonstrated that they are the class of women's lacrosse this year. And I think, at each game as it gets closer, they have to feel a little bit more pressure, on themselves to try and deliver on that promise. So, it's exciting. I think, as disappointing as the men are, hopefully now, Syracuse fans will turn their attention to the women who have, certainly deserved it this year, and how they played, and, looking to make program history. The program's still trying to get that first title.
Yep.
Maybe the second women's sport to get an NCAA title, hopefully. So, it'd be perfect to get some new banners up in the dome when it reopens in the fall.
Yeah, and then be to get ahead of myself, you take a team that we're assuming is going to make the Final Four if all goes according to plan, and then next year you add back in their two best attackers who are both out with an ACL injury, and the insanity just continues. So here's the hoping, and let's see what they do against Florida next weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously this week, John will have more detailed preview information on that matchup and how Syracuse will look to fare against the Gators.
Yep. So from that end of things, I was going to try and segue something into Chris Bleich because he's a former Gator, but I got nothing.
Kirby Dardar. Could always go Kirby Dardar.
When all else fails, Kirby Dardar. Also in modern SU football, when all else fails, Eric Dungey. Because apparently Dungey has signed a training camp deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. He was slated to participate in the what was it called, the season or
Spring League.
The Spring League. Yep. And eschewed that for a chance to try out with the Bengals. Apparently, it worked out for him because he was going to play in the Spring League in order to get a tryout in the NFL. He has now gotten that training camp spot. So. I guess we'll keep tabs on him and see what happens. It seems like this time it's actually as a quarterback and not as a tight end like he was with the Giants.
Yep. Yeah, and I think, there's an opportunity there for at least a third quarterback spot in Cincinnati.
Yep.
Obviously, it's a couple months before camp, and you don't know what's going to happen as players get cut from other places. But, the Bengals only had 3 at the end of the year, and that was the third guy they picked up on practice squad. I'm trying to blank now on who the third one was. And that seems like the spot that Dungey's competing for, that third one. And, if you can hang on to the practice squad, and get some opportunities, it's certainly, the chance to prove his worth. I initially thought he probably should have stayed in the Spring League, so people could see him and he could get some game reps.
Right.
But, I'm willing to admit I was wrong. Because obviously the goal is, like you said, to get into camp, and he's got that shot with Cincinnati, and you just hope he stays healthy and all goes well. We should be seeing him in action in some preseason games next August.
Yeah, crazy to kind of think that, we're going to see Dungey, wearing orange again. So
that's right.
It's congrats to him, and we'll see where he lands, or if he lands, or hopefully he does land. Yeah.
He landed. Trill Williams did not.
Oh, true. Forgot about
the other
that.
Side. So apparently Trill failed his physical with the Saints, so they released him. Hopefully that was, maybe just something that their medical team was a little uncomfortable with, and he's not still recovering from the injury. I forget if it was his ankle or knee that kind of forced him out of last season.
The dreaded LBI.
Yeah.
But strangely, like it definitely surprised me that of the 3 guys drafted, like I thought he was, probably the physical, like most diverse physical specimen, and it may just be some lingering issues with that lower body injury that kept him out the tail end of the year. It was something that he was still kind of playing on. And probably, I think he had said he could have played on it, or somebody somewhere, sources say that he could have played on it. But I just hope it wasn't something that will end up being a long-term issue for him, because I would love to see the guy in the league.
Yeah, and he signed really quickly as a undrafted free agent with New Orleans, so it looked like it was a good opportunity for him. That it was a place where they had an eye on him, and that him and his agent felt like he could make the squad.
Right.
So you'd be curious to see if he, gets picked up by anybody else, signs another, training camp deal,
Yep.
now that he's sort of a free agent again. Um, It'd be interesting to see. Hopefully, this was, maybe just a situation where one team's medical group just didn't feel comfortable on signing off, and who
Yep.
knows the finances. Maybe there was some way that New Orleans gets out of it, guaranteed money, if that they had some concerns or what, and that's not the anything lingering for him. So we hope Trill gets that opportunity, and
Yeah, it'll be good to see. Ideally 3 for 3 or 4 for 4 if because Cooney technically is still with the
yeah,
Saints too.
yeah,
It'd be good to see all those guys catch on. If nothing else, the DBU continuation at Syracuse would be good to see, and it seems like it's paying off on the recruiting trail. So
hmm
it would be nice to see that keep up. Speaking of schemes and how Syracuse is deploying people,
yeah.
you feel like touching on? I know you had that piece earlier in the week about the tempo and
Yep.
what Syracuse is going to need to do moving forward a little.
Yeah, so I mean, people that watched our pregame show last fall know that you, Christian, and I talked a lot about how Syracuse was so predictable
Yep.
offensively. And obviously, when we talk about injuries, that's one thing, but it's another thing to just line up and, try and call the same plays and expect them to be successful.
Right.
And you watch other college teams who move people around. So, I wrote a piece last week saying that, really the Orange don't need to get back to being the new fast and worrying about tempo. They've got some pieces that are intriguing, and if they have this veteran offensive line and these veteran quarterbacks, that there's an opportunity for them to kind of do what some of the other teams do, which is, give some motion pre-snap, use some different formations and looks to try and create mismatches and get opportunities for their playmakers. When you look around at the Syracuse offense, I don't think there's anyone that stands out right now to you as an NFL level talent. Um, like other teams.
Right.
There is no one that you're going to look at and go, okay, we can just give this guy the ball, and no one's going to stop him.
Yeah.
I think and so, but you have players that are interesting. Taj Harris, we watched him. We begged for him to be moved into the inside, and then the last two games he caught a ton of passes because it makes it easier throws for a quarterback when you have a guy running a little slant and you don't have to worry about pushing the ball to the boundary to
Yep.
complete it. You don't have to worry about the pocket holding up
Yeah.
for you to complete a 40-yard pass. You can get the ball out quick. You can hold the linebackers a little bit, the pass rush, and you can put the ball in the hands with some open field. And so I just talked about how with Harris and Benson and some of the flexibility that I'd like to see Syracuse incorporate in the offense. I know that it hasn't been a staple of the Dino Babers offense, but I think you just have to look at the personnel and
Yep.
some of the things that they've talked about is I think they understand that they've got to change things up a little bit, to take advantage of the talent that they have. And it's a Syracuse thing. We beg Jim Boeheim to adjust his style of play to fit his roster
Yep.
every year. And and I think in this case, I'm looking for Dino to say like, hey, we've got these guys. Let's change some things up. Let's add some concepts that make it easier for our quarterbacks. Make it easier because ultimately, if you're moving the ball, you'll create tempo that way.
Right.
You're not going to create tempo when you're going three and out, as we've seen, and then the numbers certainly bear that out.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing that the offense was predicated on was moving the ball, getting first downs, allowing the us to move without the defense
Yeah,
set, allowing us to get back up in a same or similar formation and run a different play, a completely different look. But if we're not playing at that utter, fast paced breakneck speed,
hmm
shifting Taj around, shifting Luke Benson out wide. We saw him in the slot in like four wide packages, but
yep,
randomly the kid's tall and he's got wheels. Like shift have one play have him running as a blocking tight end, the next play have him split wide. That's a
right,
mismatch on a corner every single day. Like bring Taj inside, have him run something over the middle that gets
yeah,
him locked onto a linebacker that he's going to burn every single time he sees him. There's ways you can mix things up. Hell, some of the Jarvian Howard or any of the running backs that are not named Sean Tucker, get them out in open field, get them doing
Yep.
stuff. Um, there's ways that this offense can work and this personnel can work in this system. And, as I'm going to do, I'm going to say it's all predicated on offensive line play.
Yeah.
But I think, and, we touched on it last week with Andy, but, DeVito's the guy. And I think he can make those plays as long as we can put people in position to make those plays.
Yeah. And you can help out your line and your quarterback by doing some of that. And,
Yeah.
and I know that you can't take pro concepts in football and basketball and implement them on a weekly basis in college football because of the practice time and limitations and everything. But you look at how teams in the NFL move around guys, and when I talk about the tight ends, I look at how Kelsey and Kittle, these guys line up all over the place,
Right.
and there's a reason for that because when they line up in one spot, the defense can put who they want over them. So if you have your tight end in the slot, they can walk out, a safety that can cover or a linebacker that's quick enough. But you line them up as a fullback, and now all of a sudden, you catch them on a wheel route, and you might have the inside linebacker who's responsible for that,
Right.
and or the dump offs, or Taj Harris, doesn't have a lockdown, shutdown corner on him. He's got a backup.
Yep.
He's got a nickel back or he's got a safety. And,
Yep.
and, and those are the things that other teams have done to Syracuse. I think of the Boston College game last year, where the Syracuse defense had really done a great job on Zay Flowers and Jurkovic because they had Iffy on him.
Yeah.
And so what BC did was they moved him into the slot. And then
Yep.
that's where he caught the touchdown pass that proved to be the game winner.
Yeah, you put him over
Because
the top
finally,
against those inexperienced safeties, and it was like, okay, this is a game changer.
yep. And I think that's, those are the things that you'd like to see Syracuse kind of implement is that at some point you've just got to look and say, all right, we're not going to let you just take away our best player. We're going to make you adjust and kind of and respond to it. So, that's the things that I'm looking for. And hopefully with a full spring and summer and then fall camp, we'll see that. We talk about depth, not only in the offensive line, but you mentioned Jarvian Howard and Abdul Adams coming back, which means you could have, four backs
Right.
and still Cooper Lutz as a change of pace guy, and then you can keep people fresh. And so, maybe in the fourth quarter you don't have a tired Sean Tucker, but you have a fresh Sean Tucker against a tired defense. And now all of a sudden these games that we've watched slip away in the second half can turn the other way where Syracuse is the one pulling away, because they've used and kind of imposed their will and worn a team down by controlling the ball and controlling the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor, but a rested Sean Tucker, especially after a year of college. Like we saw Sean Tucker last year without a year of strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
This year, Sean Tucker will be a different Sean Tucker for the better. I will eat my head if that does not happen. Um, like you've got a guy who knows how to run downhill. He's that standard make one cut and go type back, and you put a couple, 10 pounds, 20 pounds of muscle on the kid, and
Yep.
he's gonna. It's a different ball game.
I mean, we saw him against Notre Dame with Elmore as a lead blocker. I mean,
Yep.
he was the first running back to go over 100 yards against that Fighting Irish defense
Yeah.
last year.
So
And Lutz did it late in the game with a long touchdown, but Tucker was running the ball effectively against a pretty stout defense. And
yeah.
that was with a pretty banged up offensive line. So, if that group in front is healthy and playing well, and Elmore is leading the way, there's going to be some opportunities for Syracuse to punish these teams that want to play, smaller, linebackers against them.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. That I guess. Um, we have to wax poetic on football for way longer than we always should, as is
Yeah.
standard with this cast. But we should also touch on the fact that the Syracuse basketball team got some not unexpected but not
Yeah.
great news today. That Arthur Kaluma, who was a major target for 2022, opted to commit to Creighton today. So the Blue
Yeah, well,
Jays
he
have
was
gotten
actually
a.
at 21.
Oh, was he a 21?
Yeah, he had been committed to UNLV, but then only verbal.
Oh, okay.
So there's actually a few 21s who haven't signed yet, and I think some of it is
Gotcha.
the transfer portal and the pro, and I think some of them were kind of waiting on their situation. So Kaluma was a UNLV that
Yep.
we thought Syracuse got in the mix for, which I think people were surprised, but with the news that Quincy Guerrier was not coming back to Syracuse if he didn't stay in the NBA draft.
Right.
Syracuse has three forwards, maybe a fourth with Frank Anselm, but his status is like, I don't know. He could be here. He could be gone. No one
Right.
really seems completely sure of that. So you've got a very thin Syracuse roster, and Kaluma would have been a nice get because he's a defensive player. Also, as a freshman, you need to start building some depth. The transfer pool is nice, but I've got a piece that's going to come out this week, maybe tomorrow actually, looking at the 2022 class, which for the last couple of years we've been pointing to this opportunity for Syracuse post sanctions that they would load up, and kind of looking at who Syracuse is in the mix for and who they're competing against. And Kamari Lands is the one commit.
Right.
Now that Dior Johnson backed out, but you're going to lose Barama Sidibe, you're going to lose Jimmy Boeheim. Buddy Boeheim all of a sudden is on the NBA radar. He's
Right.
going to California this summer to work on his quickness and his ball handling, which is where you go if you want to work on your NBA game, because you're working with NBA trainers on that one-on-one offensive moves, and
Yep.
that's all he's going to be working on. So, if he's gone, then you're talking about Torrance, Gerard, Benny Williams. If he's as good as people say, he's probably
He's
not
probably
here for a
gone.
second year. Then it's Cole Swider, Jesse Edwards. Then you're talking about Kamari Lands and Chaz Owens, and so it's a big.
When you're dropping Chaz Owens, even though he's technically a scholarship player,
Yeah,
when you're dropping that as a viable option, we're getting a little thin.
I mean, yeah, like so if Buddy goes too, then you're talking about you're returning two centers, two forwards, and two guards,
Right.
and that's not a lot. And I know the new transfer rule changes things, but Syracuse is making a run at some top 100 players.
Yep.
Um, and the interesting piece is going to be who they end up with. There's some challenges ahead of them in terms of there's some players that they look like they're in pretty good shape, in the mix for, but one is Justin Taylor, who's from Charlottesville, Virginia,
Hmm.
and Virginia Tech is after. So you've got
Funny.
then a 7'1" center, Donovan Clingan from Connecticut, who UConn and Michigan are highly after. So
Yeah.
it's going to be some interesting challenges that they're going to have to face to land these guys. And we started last fall with Dior Johnson, and there was the dream of Dior Johnson and Zion Cruz and who Dior was going to get, and Syracuse was going to
Right.
have like 4 top 25 players. And now it's kind of like, well, Lands is a good one, and he's a 5-star, and you're still going to get some good players, but is it going to be a top 10 class? Is it going to be, Jim Boeheim loading up for one final title run, or is it going to be, hey, Jim Boeheim decides to walk out the door with both his sons, and hey, next coach, here's what you got. Good luck,
Right.
pal.
Godspeed and enjoy. Yeah, because there was
Yeah.
a stretch where it was like Cruz, Johnson, who was the two guard there? Westry?
Um, Westry, we were kind of big on, but
Pushing
then
hard.
we cooled a little bit because Johnson and Cruz were kind of the package deal. There was that
Yep.
Hatfield Huntley that we got heavily involved in this year that reclassified and picked Tennessee. So there's been some big names that Syracuse is linked with, and I don't think that Dior Johnson was a loss because I think he was a stretch that he was going to come to college anyway. But
Right. I mean,
um,
technically, Hop ended up extending him an offer at Washington this week, but
yes,
um, uh, and if he ends up going there, like sign Hopkins to bring him back here as soon as possible. But yeah, if Johnson actually makes it to a college campus, I would be utterly amazed.
yeah. I mean, I think I'd be surprised as well. So you wonder, like, all right, did you blow your shot with other guys because you chased him first? Recruiting's so fickle, you never
It
know.
is.
And then, and the question I ask is too is like, we saw Kadari Richmond transfer because he couldn't get the minutes and the freedom he wanted. If Buddy comes back next year, or in 22. It's not a bad thing, but Buddy and Joe would still be there. And so are you going to land a top 50 guard when the promises of them being, given the ball and handed the keys to a program that other schools are going to offer isn't there? So
Yep.
this summer is going to be a very interesting one as far as that 22 recruiting class and how things shape up for Syracuse. And I know, again, the transfer thing means if you miss out on high school freshmen, that just means, hey, you got to do a good job and pluck those transfers away from smaller programs.
Yep.
As we did a little bit this year, but I think you'd have to be a little bit more aggressive in what you do then.
Yeah, and that'll be this whole. We're at a weird crux for Syracuse basketball at this juncture.
Yeah, and it's only going to get weirder from here
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, for the next couple of years, it's just going to be flying by the seat of our pants.
Mm.
Speaking of flying by the seat of our pants, the women's team. And the completely new women's team is now going to be more completely new. Christiana Carr, who is the son or daughter of Chris Carr, who played in the NBA, and is currently her coach at K-State, was it?
Yep, K-State.
Yep. Is transferring in. She was an All Big 12 honorable mention last year. She's a 6'1 guard in standard Q fashion, shot over 35% from behind the arc. So, yeah, I mean, we're adding bodies again, and we're back up to a roster. But I don't know. It's a weird flux there.
Yeah, and what's interesting is adding a lot of shooting, which I think the team, suffered last year. I think they took a dip in shooting, and with Priscilla Williams back, assuming she's the one that's coming back,
Right. The
it
one.
rounds out that shooting. But the question then comes in on the new forwards and centers. Can they have the inside game? And it really highlights like what could have been with Cardoza and Engsler. If you kept those two players, even if you had still 10 transfers, if you had just kept those two, I think we would feel a lot better about what the season's going to bring.
Yeah.
This is curious that you had Carr leaving a school where her dad is on the staff. So it makes me wonder if there's some other news that may come out a little bit later this summer as
Yeah.
coaching positions shuffle around. But we'll have to
Fly,
keep an eye out for that.
fly
So,
under the radar a little. Yeah. The
but yeah,
coaching
I
carousel.
mean, I think it'll be interesting to see how well the team meshes because now you've got a lot of pieces coming in, and so you've got players coming from other programs and having to adapt to a new system with a big recruiting class coming in
Yeah.
and as freshmen and hopefully you can find some compatibility. I know they're going to Atlantis to play as
Yep.
well. They with the same time the men. But Q's are going to probably look at those first few games in his non-conference schedule and kind of give that team a good start, good kick start. So I wouldn't go too heavy if I was the women's team in terms of scheduling. I would get some easy games under your belt,
Right.
before you get into that crux of the ACC season.
Yeah, it's going to take some time to gel when you have an entirely new roster.
Right.
So I I guess more to come. Speaking of roster moves, in the continuing the wonderful segues here, it looks like former Orange Tiana Mangaya has been cut by the Phoenix Mercury and has now signed with the Northside Wizards in the Australian League. So I know I prognosticated last week that she'd immediately sign, and it was like a day after I think she was cut
Yeah.
that she was already on a roster back in Australia. So, well, I'm sure it'll be nice for her to actually get home for a while.
Hmm.
It's also maybe she's gonna try and play her way back in, and the A League is a pretty solid women's league. So good to see her land somewhere almost immediately.
Yeah, and I think it just highlights that there's been a lot of talk around for people who follow WNBA about the need for expansion. There just wasn't a lot of spots for non-first round players this year because teams are loaded. They're stacked, and so there's some rumblings that Toronto might be looking to grab an expansion team with some investors. So, hopefully it's a situation where you'd see more, a bigger push to grow and expand and provide more opportunities for these players coming out of college because the reality is that as they start to head overseas, it becomes a little bit challenging for them to get back and then compete with players coming out of college to the next year. So
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen the last of Tiana. So it'll be really interesting to see, where she takes a shot next year to try and, hopefully she feels a little bit back more closer to 100%.
Yeah.
I know she wasn't, admittedly not where she wanted to be basketball wise last year. But hopefully the experience in camp and getting a season under her belt in Australia will give her a better opportunity next summer.
Yeah, give her a chance to get back to full fitness and
Yeah.
I guess show what she's got. Um,
Yeah.
I do want to make a correction. My soccer bias is showing through. The A League is the Australian and New Zealand Soccer League. Technically, this is the WNBL, the Women's National Basketball League.
Basketball.
So, yeah. I mean, the A League rolls off the tongue a little nicer, but it's not factually accurate. So, um, I think that's about the bulk of what we're going to cover. Though we do, since we have Kevin Wall on, we have to talk track. It's
Yeah.
it's contractually obligated in the Nunes. Like there's Nunes bucks involved. Don't worry.
Yeah. The lawyers would have a field day if we don't. So ACC's was this past weekend in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Syracuse didn't place very well, but had a lot of season best. It was kind of interesting. Amanda Vestry was fourth. I think that was her lowest finish of the outdoor season. But she's comfortably in. She's got the second fastest time in the NCAA East. Regionals come up next week. I think Thursday through Saturday in Jacksonville, Florida. So she'll be in the 10K. And Annie Heffernan is also top 10. She's a grad transfer from Notre Dame who came back to finish out her eligibility this year. So look for Vestry and Heffernan. They'll have the two best shots on the women's side of making it to nationals. It's the top 12 each event, each region who'll make it to nationals, which I think is back in Eugene this year, back at Oregon's renovated Hayward Field, which looks amazing. On the men's side, JP Trojan, who's another grad transfer from William and Mary, was second in the men's 10K. He actually had the lead with about 1,000 to go, and just got passed by NC State's Ian Shanklin in the last stretch. So he was second. Joe Dragon was fifth. Again, they'll be in the 10K at regionals. There's three other Syracuse guys that look to be qualifying in the 10K.
Yep.
We'll have Aiden Tooker in the steeplechase. We might have Baldwinsville native Justice Holden Betts in the women's steeplechase. She's right on the cusp right now. And so
Nice.
it's the top 48 qualified to regionals, but they have to declare entries. And so you have a lot of athletes who qualify in multiple events. And then because of the schedule, we'll pick and choose. And so they just go down the list really
Right.
as declarations come in. So Holden Betts is right on the outside. I think there's three other guys in the 10K that have qualified. Trojan and Dragon in the 5K. I don't think they'll double. Not a bad season. The track had to adjust kind of how they trained and how they,
Right.
went for competition. They took a lot of long bus rides. The good news though is I hear that a lot of them are going to take advantage of the extra eligibility.
Oh yeah.
So it'll be a veteran team. I joked with a buddy of mine that BYU has been very competitive. They won the NCAA cross country last year, but they have a lot of 24 and 25-year-olds
Right.
who have come back from their mission. And I said to, what's NCAA cross country going to be like in like another year or two when all these schools have these 24-year-old law students and sixth-year guys who are competing? It's going to
Right.
be very interesting, sort of dynamic. But yeah, I mean, I think Amanda Vestry's been the star for the track teams this year. She's just been incredible season all the way through, and she's Syracuse's best bet probably. But Trojan's race this year, this past weekend, kind of elevated him into the conversation. That was a pretty strong performance for a guy he had a good cross country season. Wasn't great in track, but looked really good in the 10K, and so there's some pretty good recruits coming in next year, across the board. And Syracuse is adding, I think, the New York State champion in the hurdles.
Of
So
course.
getting back to, that kind of the distance runners and hurdlers, that's kind of the Syracuse track program right now. So we'll have kind of a recap of ACCs and, keep people posted on what's going on with regionals and hopefully get a few qualifiers out to nationals in Eugene.
Nice.
The
It's always.
our alumni are doing really well when
I
it comes
was.
to track.
Yeah, I was gonna say. It looks like I know we had tossed around some news on Justin recently.
Yep. Yeah, so Justin Knight has made the Olympic standard in the 1500 and the 5K. He said he might try the double in Tokyo. He's got he's PR'd in both. NBC, if you have Peacock, those of you who are EPL fans, as that's winding down, you'll be able to catch some track action on Peacock, and you might
Nice.
see Justin. Marty Hayher just qualified for the Olympic trials in the 10K over the weekend, so stepping off the marathon. And Paige Stoner is competing in the steeple and the 5, trying to get those Olympic trials qualifiers. So kind of interesting to watch. It's an interesting sort of Olympic year,
Yep.
as people are trying to make these attempts at getting to the trials and then taking your shot. But I think, barring injury, hopefully he stays healthy. We'll see Justin. We'll make Canada, and he says he's going to try and do both events. So we'll see. He's running really well, looking strong. So
Nice. Yeah. It's legit always good to see any of these alumni, performing at that standard. Um, I I know on the alumni front, I know he will never listen to this, but I have to shout out Patrice Bernier for somehow finding my tweet, noting that Miles Robinson was the first SU soccer player to score in a U.S. shirt, but he had scored in the Canada shirt. So for some reason yesterday he randomly liked my tweet from like a week ago. So I have to shout about it, even though I guarantee he's never going to hear this.
well, Patrice, if you hear this, come on the show sometime.
Absolutely. We would
But
love to have you.
that goes out to
So,
any of these guys that are still playing. And you catch the Orange Legends, boost that we've got going on. So we had Justin
yeah.
on. He's running personal best going to the Olympics. We had Martin on as part of our cross country recap. He went and
Yep.
won the marathon project like 3 weeks later. Huge win. Darrell Smith was on over the summer. He's got a cooking show now on Taste Made.
Yeah. I mean,
Shout out Darrell. So
they're
like,
killing it.
the Nunes livecast Orange Legends series will it's a career booster. So
Yeah. Did we ever think when we were when we started that up, that's what we'd be doing?
not at all, not one bit. So it's fun. So we'll hopefully continue to get some more over the summer. Catch up with some people and hear some interesting stories, and drop us a line if there's some alums that you want to hear from, because we're trying to get a diverse sort of selection here too. And
Yeah. No. And I still have to reach out to the staff on the soccer side to see if any of the old alumni will feel like popping on. I know it was actually a busy weekend. Ryan Raposo got the nod in Vancouver this week today actually.
yeah.
I don't know if that's his first start overall, but he got subbed off, but he did get the start for Vancouver. Alex is still starting in Toronto. Miles got the nod for Atlanta in their I think 1-0 win over Montreal, and Kamal last night. So every
That
week
five
of
guys that started this year.
yeah, and Tajon came
Tayshaun
on.
and
Tajon has started this year. I think it's 5 or 6.
okay.
Yeah, Kamal, Miles, Alex, Ryan, and Tajon. Because Mo is still recovering from that. I think it was some sort of sports hernia or something in the off season. So yeah, it's a great time to be an Orange alumni, be it track or soccer. So I'd say yeah, the Orange Legends series is alive and well. We
Yeah.
should probably keep pushing it. So
Yeah, well, we don't have a summer of Tebow here in Syracuse this summer, so
true.
we're gonna have to do something else to fill our time.
Yep. Get ready and get wild and woolly for the off-season content, because God knows what we're going to be throwing at you guys. We're getting
Oh,
close. I think the women's lacrosse team is the only one holding on for us. So after
yeah,
that,
hopefully they hold on for a couple weeks.
yeah. After that, it's just the Wild West. But
Yes,
God.
it'll be something.
Yep. So we'll see how that goes. But until then, for Kevin, I'm Steve. Go Orange.
Go Orange.